So good evening, everyone. I'm Vicki Abelays, and I'm delighted to join your community's conversation this evening about the film Chasing Childhood. As my long journey with Race to Nowhere taught me, we have the power to reclaim childhood and reinvent our pressure cooker school culture. This is why I'm thrilled to be partnering with the film team behind Chasing Childhood, a film that is perfect for this moment of envisioning a better path forward. I've heard from a lot of parents that one of the silver linings of the pandemic has been hitting the pause button. As parents, we've been forced to slow down, to cancel activities, to bask in unstructured time with our kids. And now as the world reopens this spring and we begin to enter post-pandemic life, I think we have an unprecedented opportunity to ask ourselves, what is it we want most for our kids? And so I'd like to invite each of the speakers this evening to introduce themselves and to share their own thoughts on how the pandemic might provide a portal to a new vision for childhood and school. And then I'd like to invite everybody who's here with us this evening in the audience to reflect on that same question about what's possible as the world reopens for our children, our families, and our schools. Please go ahead and add your reflections in the chat box. And then as we're getting started, to the extent that you have questions that came up after viewing Chasing Childhood, we'd love to see your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom. And then I'll be directing those questions to our panelists. So let's get started with you, Eden.
Thank you. Hi, Wilton. I am so honored to be here. I really have to express my deepest gratitude to you all as a community for welcoming the filmmaking team into your schools and some of you into your homes, into your meetings. I want to thank Superintendent Kevin Smith, Kathy Kuhn, Jen Falcone, Bob O'Donnell, Lauren Feltz, Colleen Fossett, Carrie Etkinhead, everyone involved with the Free Play Task Force, and especially Vanessa Elias, who also we filmed with extensively, and the Fairfield County psychologists, as well, of course, the Eason family. So thank you to you from the bottom of my heart for letting us help make your story part of this film and, trusting us, because it's meant the world and it wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So thank you for that. And in answer to Vicky's question, I definitely have hoped that my life might not return quite to the way it was before, as much as I've missed aspects of the pre-COVID life. I think maybe it was just turned up a little too high for all of us in my family. And I think I have some trepidation that it's all going to go back like, and our muscles will be very out of shape for this kind of lifestyle, and it will be even more difficult than it was before. I guess my news today is my son just stepped down from one of his travel teams. So now my family will have somewhat fewer logistics. But, I guess I hope that as we go back, that we can kind of carry forward some of the silver linings of this year that has been very hard, but also had a lot of gifts. So anyway, I'll pass it on. That's my hope.
Thank you. Leonore, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. So I'm Lenore Skenazy. Hi, very happy to be here. Another enormous Wilton fan. If you know how often I refer to Wilton and a couple of the stories that happened there, a Halloween when the kids all went trick-or-treating without the parents and the parents just said, let grow. That's like our favorite story. We tell it to donors, not to mention other schools. So yes, thank you for having us. I started Let Grow. Before that, I had started the Free Range Kids movement. If you see me in the film, I'm the one who let her 9-year-old ride the subway alone. For what it's worth, he's 24. You'll probably see him behind me now. It's been a long time. And as far as COVID goes, I know everybody's thinking deficit, but we all talk about the greatest generation, and the greatest generation wasn't born great. They lived through a depression and then a world war and a looming, nuclear catastrophe. And not that I want any of those things for us, but sometimes you go through the bad times so that you come out at the better times a little tougher, and knowing what you're made of and getting to know your family a little better, and maybe some new interests. And it's a terrible thing to have a pandemic. It's a terrible thing to have a world war, but you come through them, and this might be the greatest generation. So don't only think in deficits, think about what they got.
Thank you. Genevieve, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Genevieve Eason. I'm the Executive Director of Wilton Youth Council here in Wilton. And then obviously you all have, if you've seen the film, you know a fair amount about other aspects of my life as well. And I just wanted to share some thank yous. You'll hear me thank some of the same people Eden did, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that any success we've had at Wilton Youth Council and with the Free Play Matters Task Force is due to our entire team. We're so fortunate to have amazing volunteers and dedicated partners in our community. And I want to acknowledge a few of those people. So our board of directors, who are so involved, committed, and supportive. Colleen Fossett, who is such a wise, strong leader behind the scenes. She never claims the spotlight, even though she totally deserves it. Vanessa Elias, who's just a tireless advocate for children's mental health. Rosalie Witt and her predecessor, Carrie Aitkenhead, who both generously share their passion for education and their expertise with us. Everyone on the task force who represents parents, our partner organizations, the schools. And we're just especially grateful for our strong partnership with the public schools in Wilton. We know how lucky we are to have that. The superintendent, Dr. Kevin Smith, and his administrative team, who've been supporters and collaborators since the very inception of the task force. And I have to give a shout out to Kim Zemo, the district Safe School Climate Coordinator. Kim is a treasured partner on countless youth council programs. And on a personal level, she got Savannah and me through many hard days when she was the social worker at Wilton High School and Savannah was a student there. So I'm really grateful for all the opportunity that I've had to work with all these amazing people over the years and learn so much. And I've had great mentors, and I'm really lucky, and I know it. So a few words about my hopes for moving forward from this time. I think transitions like this are just such an opportunity for reflection. We're moving into the next phase, and I really hope that we can take a moment and really think about what we missed from our pre-pandemic lives and what worked for us, and then what we gained during this past year and what worked for us now. And then going forward, I think it's a great opportunity to, we don't have to just go back to our old lives. We can think about what we want to do differently, what we want to take forward, and what we're willing to let go of. And so that's my hope, that we'll have the opportunity that we'll really take advantage of that opportunity. So thank you.
Great. Savannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Savannah. I am in the movie. I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody who lived the life. But I think as far as my thoughts about post-pandemic life, something that I've really appreciated about this time is that I ended up moving to a new city in the middle of all of this. And something that the pandemic has helped me keep in touch with a lot of my close friends from college and high school in a way that if I had moved to a new city during a normal time, I might have been more invested in building a new life. But now I have been working on that, but also maintaining my older relationships. And I think that's something that can apply to families as well, because now that we've all been through this, we all know how to interact with each other online in a way, on Zoom and on all these different platforms, in a way that maybe some people in our grandparents' generation or our parents' generation may not have been super fluent with before. But now kids are able to connect with their grandparents and extended family who may not live close in a way that they may not have been able to before. So I think that's an important thing to take away from all this.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Good evening, Wilton. What's such a wonderful community. I was there, gosh, about a year and a half ago. I know the superintendent, Kevin Smith, is an amazing, amazing educator. I just want to give a shout out to him. Just something about me real quick, as an educator, and I put myself as a father first, father of many children. Speaking about the pandemic, I've never been closer to my children during this pandemic. I've spent so much time with them. Maybe they didn't want to spend as much time with me, but I certainly spent a lot of time with them, especially my youngest, who is 5. I count it as a real blessing, because you only have childhood once. And I think when you see it through the lens, as a parent, you realize how precious that is. And I watched my children become bored, which I was very thankful for. I watched them become very creative, things I never thought they could do before. So there's a lot of great things, but we do have to reimagine education, which we can talk about in a little bit, how we can maximize the potentials and talents of all of our children. And I'm hoping post-pandemic, which will be very soon, we can really not only redefine what childhood should be, but redefine what education must be in order for us to move forward. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Great. So I'm going to get started by asking Michael. I'm going to start with you. We have a question that came in this evening from the audience about how you got your board to buy into allowing more time for play when it takes away from academics. This is a question from a kindergarten teacher in a neighboring town who'd like to be able to convince the leaders in her school district that this is really important. And she'd love to see the Let Grow movement start in her community, which is Ridgefield. So thoughts on that?
Well, if I was being cheeky, I would just say I paid them all off and then we move forward. But that is not the case. It's really important. And first of all, to our kindergarten teachers, especially the teacher who just asked, you should all be sainted overnight in some capacity. You have such an amazing responsibility and you really should be on a pedestal. But that being said, it comes down to, you have to be very passionate about the reasons why. You have to back it up with the science. I hate to say that, but you do. You have to show why, if you move in this direction, what the outcome will be. And there's so much research out there. For those of you who saw the movie, I'm assuming all of you did, Dr. Peter Gray makes an outstanding case for the importance of play and what the benefits are, especially mixed age play, and that I know our kindergarten teachers and primary teachers know about. But from a policy standpoint, because this is where the rubber hits the road, you have to have a community, you have to have a school, you have to have classrooms that are willing to take risks. And what people don't understand, I think, where not enough people understand, is that less is more. When I first went into Patchogue Medford, when I went into a kindergarten classroom, first grade classroom, it was like walking into a hospital. There were no kitchen sets, there were no Legos, no wooden blocks. And that's the first thing you have to do, is you have to make sure children, it actually sounds criminal when you say that, but it's true. You reinvest in those types of opportunities. You allow teachers to test drive certain things. We know when it's organic and it's not mandated and shoved down educators' throats, they're willing to give it a go, as Ken Robinson would say. And then when you see the evidence of it working in small doses and teachers seeing that it's working, then the dominoes start to fall. But the critical role in all this is the principal. The principal needs to allow, I hate to say that, but it's true, allow these things to happen. For me as a superintendent, it was about educating the board. It was about educating the board as far as what happens locally, what's happening nationally, and then most important, what's happening internationally. Look at what's happening in Finland. Look what's happening in other countries and how they fare. So if test scores are what gets you up in the morning, which it shouldn't, but if it is, you look to some of those countries and they are doing a lot less academics than we are, and we should follow suit.
Great. Leonore, I'm just curious, do you have any resources at your organization for somebody, whether it's a teacher or a parent, who wants to bring this to the principal of their school?
Oh, what a softball and lovely question. Yes, we do. Let Grow. Oh, my name is not showing up there with Let Grow, but if you go to letgrow.org and you click on school programs, there's a list of the Let Grow project where kids get a homework assignment to go home and do something on their own. And then we also have the Play Club, and you can download, there's a letter for teachers, there's a letter for explaining how to do it for whoever's going to be doing it at your school. There's a little pledge for the kids to take, it's all there. And actually I was just talking to Peter Gray this morning, and I'm looking at my notes that I wanted to say. Oh yes, this is what he said, because we're getting some Play Clubs up in Boston, and we're going to be studying them. And frankly, if you want us to study your Play Club, we'd be happy to do too and see how things change. And what Peter said is that their studies show that when kids are actually playing with each other, their vocabulary is higher and more enriched because it's not a boring adult saying to them, oh, you're playing with the red block. Is the red block good? Do you like the block? It's hard, isn't it? When they're playing with other kids, it's like, no, that's not out. It was out. Well, prove it. Well, I told you. And so they because they're so motivated to get on with playing and to have fun, they're a head taller when they play. That's Lev Vygotsky's word. So if you want kids to have more vocabulary and better relationships and really be excited about coming to school, all these things are something that I think the school board would be interested in. And if anybody has time later, I'll tell you about the explosion of speech that happened at a school with a play club.
Fabulous. And I would just add my 2 cents on this, that to the teacher who asked this question, it's always great within your community if you can form alliances with others before approaching your principal. If you can find some like-minded parents, like-minded educators, I think there's more power when we're working together. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just add that there's an organization like Wilton Youth Council in almost every town around here. So you can find the one in your town. I mean, they're different in different places, but every town has some group like this. So you got to find them and bring them along.
Great. So I have a question for you, Genevieve. Somebody asked in advance of tonight's event, have you had any negative feedback about your exposure in the film or about how you handled Savannah's mental health and addiction challenges?
I think that's actually a great question because that's everybody's big fear. That's why people don't talk about these things, right? Is the stigma. And no, in fact, we've gotten lots of feedback, both Savannah and I think, and it's all been very positive. It's been people reaching out either to say that they appreciate that we were willing to talk about it and share our story, and either just expressing appreciation for that, but also many people saying, me too, I have that same experience, and it's so great to hear someone talk about it. And so I think it's important to know that when you're going through something like this, don't be afraid of people's reactions. We're afraid to talk about it because we're afraid people will judge us or be cruel. And in fact, people are really loving and supportive. And when you reach out, when you start talking about it, you discover how many other people are going through something similar and that you're not alone. So I think I hope people take that away from this.
Thank you. Savannah, do you have anything that you want to add about this? Just about what it felt like as a young person to participate and to be so vulnerable in a very public way.
The only things I've heard from people in the community, people who've seen the movie, are people I went to school with sending me a Facebook message because I don't even really know them very well and saying, I saw the movie. Thank you so much for talking about that. Me too. Right. Like even people who, like just everyone is saying that's what I experienced, and I think it's really important to talk about it because when we talk about it, we find other people who have experienced it, and going through it together is a lot easier than going through it alone.
Absolutely. Thank you. I was actually just incidentally, one of the other cast members from the film, Julie Lithcott-Haynes, was on Fresh Air this week. In case anybody gets a chance to listen, it was a great show. And she talked a little bit about her son's experience with mental health challenges and also the number of young people who are impacted by this epidemic. And it's quite high. She quoted 1 and 2 young people, and our experience oftentimes in communities is even higher than that. So it's great that both of you were open to sharing your story. Leonora, I have a question for you. It looks like a parent has written in that their youngest child was the one who forgot things, a change of shoes, his violin, signed permission slips. So this parent knew that he or she should learn from his mistakes. He was a very sensitive child who was stressed out a lot. So she or he made a lot of trips to school with forgotten items, not wanting to contribute to his child's success. And the same parent would often ask before he got on the bus, but didn't want to nag. So how do you negotiate between teaching young people responsibility and also helping them stay afloat?
Oh, how I wish somebody else would take this, because I don't think there's an answer. Sometimes somebody once wrote to me and said, like, I never brought my kids lunch because, that would teach them a lesson. I was like, well, obviously, if he kept forgetting his lunch, it wasn't teaching him a lesson. And I don't think you're crippling your child forever if you're helping them somewhat, especially if they're struggling. If the problem is forgetting things, and that's like becomes a tense issue, don't focus on that one. Honey, do something else independently. Run an errand for me. Learn to ride your bike already. Help your brother do something. Go pick something up. So you don't have to focus on the things that you think are worst and most tense and frustrating. Those, you don't have to be the perfect parent, and you don't have to be the perfect free range parent. There's not this recipe. It's just to, in a way, in some sphere that doesn't feel that make or break, trust them to do something on their own. And I think that will generalize a little more, and you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Thank you. Savannah, I have another question from you, from Carrie Ann, who's on the call tonight. She says, Savannah, you're so courageous to share your story in the film. Thank you for your willingness to teach us about your experience. I'm wondering what you think parents are missing. What do you think kids and teens need? And how can we, as parents and educators, be more supportive without hovering or helicoptering?
So, this is a hard question. Thank you for thanking me. I honestly just, it doesn't bother me so much to share my story, and I feel like I'm lucky that I am willing to be so open, and it just comes naturally to me, because then I get to share it with other people and get this positive feedback and know that I'm helping people. I think that as far as what parents are missing, I don't know if it's what they're missing, but I think something parents can do is just in everyday life, when nothing's going wrong or little things are going wrong, but not in the middle of a crisis, just normally, just normalize the fact that it's okay to ask for help, right? With small things, with medium things, with big things, it's okay to ask for help. And just reinforcing that message over and over again is really important. I think that's something that my parents actually did really well, because I was very comfortable asking for help. Even if it is hard to ask for help, my parents made it easier for me. And when your kid does ask for help, it's important to validate their experience and figure out together what they need. And whether it's the kid is struggling with some homework assignment, like one thing, or in general, homework is hard, reaching out to your community and figuring out how to help your kid with that. Or if your kid's in crisis and needs something major, just saying it's okay that you feel this way, and it's not always going to feel this way, and we're going to fix it, even if it's hard. I'm not sure if that entirely addressed the question, but
I think that was great. Thank you. Michael, I have a question for you. What about the fact that I only let my kids take 2 AP classes because college is for college, not for high school, and you only get one shot at childhood? But according to this parent's children, and every other child is taking 3 or more APs, and they were terrified that colleges would not accept them because this parent's children were afraid they didn't measure up. How do you undo kind of this culture when parents are afraid to let their children be academically original? So afraid to let them be academically original that they sacrifice childhood.
It's a real fear, for sure. Before I answer that, I know when Nora was asked the question about the child who, forgets things, and I just want to touch upon it 30 seconds. The power of routines cannot be underscored or underestimated. If a child has a routine in the morning, I can't tell you how grounding that is. And over time, the more they do the same thing and they're responsible for what they're doing, the more they're inclined to not forget. So I just want to go there real quick. Okay, so AP, my favorite topic. Actually, it's not my favorite topic. It's my second favorite topic. After I left Patchogue Medford as a superintendent, I'm now in Port Washington on the north coast, north shore, I should say, of Long Island. It's the Gold Coast of Long Island. So it's very similar to Wilton. Part of the reason why I was brought there was to actually answer that question and some other questions, because it's all about balance. And in as much as 10 years ago, maybe the almighty College Board AP Love Fest was so important, it is less important now. And I'm telling you, as an educator who has 3 children, 2 children in high school and 1 who's in college, they don't look at AP scores as much as they used to. You will find so many hundreds of colleges, universities, top-notch ones that are highly competitive, that don't really look at the AP scores anymore. They look at how well-rounded a student is. They look at how much they give back to the community. They look at other things that are more important than AP scores. And it's all about balance. I've said I've shadowed students who have taken 3, 4, 5 AP courses, and I followed them from the moment they walk into school until, I don't follow them when they go to bed, but when they leave and they go home. And let me tell you something, how much of an impact, a negative impact that has for kids. It's a massive negative impact. And I find when most kids go to college, they're like, I can't believe how much work we did. It's actually less work in college than what it was in high school. So I believe over time, you have to trust the fact that colleges were no longer really holding ACTs, SATs as, you know, the ultimate inroad to a university. And it's the same thing for the number of AP courses. Colleges would rather see you, students, take electives, things that you're passionate about, things that you would never normally try, that make you well-rounded, that opens up the horse blinders so you can see the world in a whole new way. That would be my first reaction.
Great. So I think this question might be best answered by you, Genevieve, but if there's somebody else, feel free to chime in. So hi, everyone. We're interested in Wilton schools, if there's a more play-based approach. I'm under the impression that there is, and that draws us to Wilton. This is a family looking for a district that values the whole child and doesn't focus on testing. They're currently living in a neighboring town where the focus from day 1 to day 182 of school is on the test. Have changes been implemented into the Wilton schools?
So a lot has changed in Wilton schools, and I am not an expert on the curriculum or how the day plays out in Wilton schools. So I'm a little reluctant to try to give many details on this, and I certainly wouldn't be able to compare our schools to our neighboring towns. I'm not an educator and I don't work in the district. But I can say that I have seen in the last few years a real shift in the importance that our schools are putting on the well-being of students, on wellness, on play. Our elementary schools have made significant changes, especially prior to the pandemic. Obviously, this past year has been super challenging for everyone, but we do have play clubs in our Wilton elementary schools now. They are on pause right now because of the pandemic, but they were enormously popular when they were introduced, and they definitely will make a comeback when the time is right. Our schools, our K-2 elementary school now uses a model called purposeful play. I'm not an expert on purposeful play, but Mike's nodding his head, so he might be able to talk to that a little more. And there's also a much more emphasis on loose parts play in our elementary schools. Our 3 through 5 school has loose parts in their media center, and their loose parts in the classrooms at the younger grades. They've increased recess times in our elementary schools. And just last week, our superintendent presented a draft of the new Portrait of a Graduate to the Board of Education. And it has, I think, 6 main components, one of which is balanced, healthy human being. So that is a really I see Mike's reaction to that. I mean, I can't stop smiling about that. I love that is now in our portrait, going to be a part of our Portrait of a Graduate. So there has been a big shift in the way our schools are looking at these things, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for their thoughtfulness about that. And I'm going to toss it to Mike.
Yeah, thank you. That is really amazing. I mean, I don't even know what to say. As a superintendent, that is the ultimate, especially in a portrait of a graduate, which in my school district, again, which is very similar to Wilton, we're doing the same thing right now. We're creating a new vision and mission and a portrait of a graduate. So if we can come close to what you are doing, I will consider that a success. But ultimately, it's about flourishing once they leave the system of being in school. How do they flourish? How do they actually enjoy life? uh, After they spend 14,000 hours within that system itself. So congratulations, that's wonderful.
Great. Leonora, a couple of questions for you. First of all, will you share with us about children's experience in special ed and Let Grow?
Yeah.
What have you
Yeah.
seen?
Yeah, I was doing that in the comments right now. First of all, I just had one question, which is 14,000 hours? What?
That's how long students are in school from kindergarten until they graduate, 14,000 hours. And that could be viewed in two different ways. Amazing.
What's the good way?
Well, the good way is if they are in a Montessori-esque type of, which sounds like early childhood, is wonderful. That's wonderful way to build skills. But yeah, if you are in cell block C for 14,000 hours, that is done.
Yeah. Wow. So the question about special ed, I'll tell you two stories. One is I was just suggesting looking at our, actually a video that we made of a play club at one of Mike's schools back when he was in Pat Med. And you'll see that there's all these kids playing and I don't know who's who. But afterwards, when we were talking to the teachers who had been watching, they said, I now remember the word, they said that one of the girls that had been playing with these older girls was in a self-contained classroom. And I didn't know what that meant. And I think that is the phrase now for special ed. So it's just mix and match. And really the great thing about mixed age play for kids of every ability and everything is that if you aren't up to speed in your grade, or you're a little awkward, or you don't have friends. I mean, one of the kids that we interviewed in that at that play club, we said, "What do you like about play club?" He said, "Well, before play club, I didn't have any friends." It's like, what? What? And now you do? I mean, that's the breakthrough moment. That's when 14,000 hours does not sound like cell block C, but actually time that you go and you get to make your friends and meet your friends. And I know that at Mike's schools that the attendance went up on play club day. But I wanted to tell you a story also about the Let Grow project, which we did at actually where Mike's kids go to school in a different district, Sayville. They were giving all the 7th graders the Let Grow project, go home and do something independent on your own. And that meant the kids in special ed too. And so I talked to the paraprofessional, I guess, who was the head of that or who was willing to talk to me. And she said that the people who loved this project most were the people assigned to those children, like the one-on-ones, I guess. Mike, I'm looking to you. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so paraprofessionals can be one-on-ones. They work with one student throughout the whole day, correct?
Yeah. So I heard that they were the happiest because they were the ones who had an inkling that these kids could do more, but they were supposed to be helping them all the time. And the parents were expected to help them all the time. But when their job was to, when the parents had to pull back and let the kids unload the dishwasher, one kid who always insisted on Jolly Rancher candies to do anything, he had oppositional defiance disorder, had to do something by himself. And he not only made dinner, he set the table and he put out the forks and the knives and he gave them their food. And it was this, it always reminds me of the scene in The Miracle Worker with Helen Keller, where she's just eating her food and Annie Sullivan is teaching her, no, you have to not do that. And the mother is like, well, that's enough. You've taught her to use a knife and fork. It's like, that's not enough. This kid can do so much more. And I'm not saying that parents are deliberately keeping their kids back, but you get into routines. And if you say, wait, tonight you have to resist the urge to help and let them do something independently, everybody is blown away. Not all the time, but there's these amazing breakthroughs that I was hearing about.
Great, thank you. Michael, I want to ask you a question that came in earlier. How do we move away from an accountability model in the upper grades to a model of collaboration, critical thinking, and the collective good?
Boy, you're going to need about 4 new webinars for this one. I think, and I try to use humor to mask seriousness in some ways, because this is really the age-old question of how do you change the model of education, this agrarian, industrial model of widgets, standardizing kids coming out to really looking at the latent talents and potential of our kids, especially at the secondary level, where and I know this is happening probably in Wilton and other schools, you have kids who are hyper competitive for whatever reason. They're not taking the electives because they're not weighted courses, and they want their GPAs to be, 5.7 as opposed to a 4.0, because if you're not in the top 10, the top 15, it's the way that the system is built. And the system really, truly needs to be reconstructed. To me, there are many conversations that have to take place at the state level. If the state education departments allowed allowed school districts to really to have more local control, to actually, apply for waivers for certain things, as far as exit exams. For in New York, it's the Regents exams. You have to take 5 Regents exams in order to graduate. I mean, that's clinically insane. In many other countries, it's 1. I'm not sure what it is in Connecticut, but all these things are intermingled, interconnected. The best thing you can do is have an amazing high school principal, an amazing superintendent, and an outstanding board of education. And you can move mountains if you have those 3 components, coupled with teachers who are willing to take chances. That's probably the easiest way to begin for right now. But it's not easy because the deck is stacked against you, but it can be done.
Great. And I think that's like one of the things that's so powerful about watching a film like Chasing Childhood, is to share stories of positive things that are happening in other communities and allow others to be inspired. And so I think there's so much power in the storytelling and in the partnership, or the potential for partnership between districts, as we saw in the film, and in the power of people coming together this evening and talking to each other, and then being ambassadors for this message everywhere they go. I think that's how you grow change. And in the meantime, small steps. If you're a teacher, if you're a principal, if you're a parent, taking those small steps and then sharing those with others, that's how we begin to change a culture, I think. Okay, so I have a question for you, Leonore. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. How do you live in an area like Wilton and Fairfield County, where organized sports and high academics are highly stressed? How do you encourage your kids to focus on free play when it's hard enough to keep up with your neighbors? And I'm just going to ask that together with somebody else asked a question that I personally experienced with my son, is when you're the parent that steps off the treadmill and there's no one else around to play with.
Yeah. That is my big question. And that's why we did start the Let Grow Play clubs, because first of all, you can't be the only parent because you'll seem crazy. And then you send your kid to the park and there's no one else at the park, and perhaps somebody calls CPS on you. So that's not ideal. But if you do keep your school open before or after school for free play, first of all, there's a group of kids there, right? And they're mixed ages. So you got the quorum already there. And then you have somebody who's supervising, sort of like a lifeguard, so that parents aren't nervous. And whether you're in a great neighborhood like Wilton or a dangerous neighborhood, the kids are at the playground at the school already. So it doesn't, your neighborhood almost is irrelevant because there they are. And then they get used to doing it. I mean, what I think is great is, like, if you have an after school Let Grow Play club and kids have a place to go where it's not immediately to, Kumon or, travel lacrosse or, some other organized activity, they have something to do. They're with their friends. If you print out our little thing from Let Grow, it explains all the great social emotional benefits they're getting from this. And it gets them used to playing. And we're trying to find out if the kids who play there end up playing more outside because they've developed even the skill of organizing a 4-square game, or even realized how fun it is to draw with chalk. So start out at the school. I don't know how they're going to be doing it at 14 or 15. We don't have play clubs in high schools, but start it out young and renormalize the idea of kids playing without somebody organizing everything they do.
Great, thank you. So I just want to take a moment. I know Eden Warfeld needs to hop off shortly. So Eden, I wanted to give you a chance to say goodnight to everyone before we continue with the conversation.
Thanks, thank you. I guess I just also wanted to comment, because someone, one thing that I think has been really amazing as we've started to roll out the film and have people engaging with each other about it, is just this opportunity to find and build community and find like-minded parents and friends, and so that, as somebody said, what if you don't overschedule your kid and then there's no one for them to play with? And that has been really inspiring. And I really hope that you all will continue to, if you found value in watching this, to just help spread the word. Because as Vicki and others have mentioned, I mean, we really hope that the film can be the beginning of a conversation and hopefully a tipping point for some cultural change. And I do think we're at an inflection point with the pandemic, and as we're kind of exiting that. So Margaret Munzer-Loeb, who is my directing partner and the executive producer on the film, and I were, so excited to be working with Vicki, who's really helping get the film out to communities. I mean, so I will put it in the chat, just our website and how to do that if you want to help pass the word on or bring it to a church, a temple, any community group you can think of, any school, any library, or also, meetings of professionals, psychologists or school superintendents, or, social conferences on social emotional learning, or there's just so many potential avenues. And so we will rely on all of you to be kind of mouthpiece for the film. And we are grateful to you for watching, and also to the whole community of Wilton for welcoming us to your town. So I'm going to say good night. I'm putting our website in the chat, and you can click through there but Vicki can also add another website if that's better.
Sure, I can do that. And I'll add my email so that anybody that's on this evening.
To keep your ear out, we're developing a Chasing Childhood podcast.
Wow, I didn't even know
which
that.
We're very excited about, and we're working with somebody from the former New Hampshire Public Radio. So anyway, we're really excited about that. More to be continued. Follow us on social media, check out our website. We'll have updates on what's happening. And good night, Wilton. Thank you for watching our movie and for letting us film with you. We're really grateful. Bye.
Good night. Great. Okay, Lenore, I need to apologize. I didn't realize that I was saying your name incorrectly.
Nobody says my name right. That's
okay. So do I have it right now, Lenore?
Lenore, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm so sorry about that. I'm really curious. Just a question for me, and then I'll keep going with questions. I just want to invite the participants tonight to continue to add your questions to either the chat feature or the Q&A placed on Zoom. But Savannah, I have a question for you, just as a student. What would you like on behalf of students everywhere, for all of the parents and educators and school leaders who are on this call to know? What would you like us to know that might help bring childhood and adolescence to a healthier place, and a place where you have more opportunities for agency over your experiences?
I think a really important part of that is like asking your kids, like what I would say about how I could have more agency, it might differ from kid to kid. And I think just having a conversation with your children, and if you're an educator, with the kids in your classes about what they need, and they'll tell you. if you present it in such a way that they know that you're going to listen, they'll tell you what they need. I think something else for parents to know, I think I've seen a lot of questions about how can we convince, like, how are we going to get the superintendents to go along with it? Something I've heard my mom say a lot is the school board and the superintendent's office and everyone at the school, the teachers, they're reacting to what they think the parents want. And if you come together with your community and you say, and you start talking about it, right? I think that's just so important, is to talk about it. And you talk about it with your friends, and they talk about it with their friends, and you talk about it with your kids' teachers. And if you build this thing where people are having an open conversation, and you bring that to the school board and the superintendent's office, I think they're likely to respond well, because their whole job is to work for you. So if you, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but this is, I think it's just about having open communication and asking for what you want. And I think that's true. You have to ask for what you want in every situation. You have to ask your kids for what you want from them, which is to be honest with you. You have to ask your kids' teachers for what you want from them. I think it's all about being honest and talking about it.
That's great. Just a couple thoughts I want to add to what you just said. First of all, somebody in the audience just sent a message to you, Savannah, thanking you. Her son has wanted to be a baker his whole life, and he regards you, or he or she regards you as their hero. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I just wanted to say to the Wilton community and to everybody that's on this panel tonight, one of the things that we're going to be encouraging communities to do is to invite students to watch the film, and then to have student listening circles where the students share their experiences and the adults sit in a circle around the students and just listen. And I think that we could learn a lot from that.
Wow.
Yeah, we did that with Rachel.
That's worthy of a documentary.
I think you're right, Lenore. And then I'm just reminded again of this podcast that I listened to earlier in the week with Julie Lithcott-Haynes, where she said on her new book about Your Turn, which is about being an adult. And she invited young people everywhere to stop pleasing everybody else. And I think our kids do generally want to please their parents. They want to please their teachers, and there are a lot of adults making demands on their time. So to stop pleasing others and to really find time to sit and just be with yourself and really reflect on what is it that you want to do, and kind of turn down the noise that's coming all around you from our culture, from our schools, from your family. So I really appreciate your response. Genevieve, I want to ask you,
That's personal.
do you see this?
Yeah, we see them all.
Okay,
I think we see them all. I actually had a question for Mike.
Sure.
By Mike, which is that, okay, if you're in a well-off neighborhood where people are worried about where their kids are going to go to college, are you making headway in having them see the whole child idea, or that maybe there's something good about free time and free play and all of that?
Are they here right now watching this? The pandemic, it definitely slowed it down for sure. I say this often, people want change until it happens. And so when they want change and you start to turn the tanker ship, people start getting very itchy and scratchy. Especially when it comes to what they hold most sacred, which is what happens within the school walls. I think Savannah brought a really great point up. Nothing's really going to change, I don't think, unless students tell their teachers, they tell the superintendent, tell the board what they want. Because when someone asks me what my job is, Lenore, it's to serve kids. And it's to serve our educators to get what they need and deserve. But we need to know what they need and deserve sometimes. And so that feedback loop is really important. But I think we will, for sure. It's a lot harder than I anticipated, which is why I look so haggard right now. But it's not easy. But it's well worth it. And if I see the inspiring thing is what I'm seeing, what's happening in Wilton. I really do. It's like looking into a crystal ball. Hopefully 2 years from now is where we will be. So kudos to you. And by the way, Vicki, beyond measure, not to put this out there, but there are so many parallels. There are so many just cross sections of how this all comes to be. Your work is incredibly inspiring and very important as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Michael. I think this is a real moment, again, to just reflect on what is it that we want for childhood? What is it we want in our schools? And I think the two films make really strong companions. And I'll just say, I know everybody that's participating probably wants this wholesale sweeping change. And having been at this now for the last decade and being somebody who's action oriented and frustrated with the slow pace of change, there have been lots of changes in the last decade, and we need everybody that is participating tonight to become an ambassador for the message and start making changes in your homes, your classrooms. You can start small baby steps. And also, if your school or your community is not ready for wholesale change, I think you could start by creating schools within schools, grades within grades, where people have the option to opt into something different. And once people in the community see that, oh, this third grade class that doesn't have homework or has more opportunity for play, or the Let Go project, those kids are thriving, then more people will start asking for that kind of change. So I think that any change you make, small steps or large, begin to change our culture. So thank you for that, Michael. I was going to ask you, Michael, can you speak to the intersection between academics and social emotional lives and why it's important to recognize that they're not mutually exclusive?
I think it's really, yeah, it's really simple. You know, just think of yourself as a person. If you are not in a good place socially, emotionally, even physically, it is very hard to do anything. I know, you know, I joke around with my wife, so I can say this. If Erin and I get into a little tiff before I go to work, I'm short circuited for at least a half hour, 45 minutes. I can't do anything. You imagine our kids when they go into school, if they are in a bad place or a difficult place socially and emotionally, it is our responsibility to make sure they get those supports so then they can flourish academically and learn. So for me, it starts, that's where it begins. You hear Maslow before Bloom, you hear all these different things. And it is true. It's completely true. And it's not rocket science. The problem is, I think, is that a lot of schools don't put those supports in, you know, whether it's extra social workers, whether it's programs that may work over time. But for me, it's always social and emotional supports and growth before academic performance.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel like the physical and mental health of children is kind of foundational before you can even talk about opportunities for learning and growth. So thank you for that. Let me just take a quick look here to see what else.
I'll tell you my favorite Wilton story of the Wilton stories that we tell. Vicki?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure anyone could hear me.
Oh no, Lenore, you're
yeah.
giving me a little moment to look.
Oh, okay. So this was told to me by the principal of, I think the school that goes from grades 3 to 5, who is Genevieve. Is that Jen?
That's Jen Falcone. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the children who was in somewhere between 3rd and 5th grade went to the local market in Wilton, which I imagine is a really beautiful place with like really fancy muffins, but who knows? And he went there to buy something, and the staff was like looking at each other and looking at him, and you know, some of the shoppers were a little confused. And finally, one of the clerks or the manager went up to the kid and said, "Excuse me, what are you doing here by yourself? Where's your mom or your dad?" And he said, "Oh, I'm doing my Let Grow project." And they're like, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, I have to do something by myself. It's my homework assignment." And they're like, "All right." And then when other kids started coming in to buy, I'm sure they're equally gourmet, delicious muffins, then it didn't make a difference. It's like, oh, it's a Let Grow kid. Oh, it's another Let Grow kid. And that's how community changes. I mean, I'm not sure it does away with grades or APs, but it sure means that kids going around the street on their scooter, on a bike, on their feet is normal again. And that's all we're trying to do, is bring a little normalcy back to childhood that has become so pressured, so focused on just how they're doing academically that almost everything else fell away. And we're just building that back in. When I think of childhood, sometimes I think about, you know, we got to the point where it is so perfect and optimized. It's sort of like we took old-fashioned bread and then we finally got it to, you know, beautiful, fluffy, white Wonder Bread. And then someone said, you know, I think we're missing something. And we started putting back in the whole grains and the quinoa or whatever. And it's just putting stuff back in that was always an organic part of childhood that we took out, thinking that we were making it better and better and more perfect and more optimized. And actually we jumped it. What is it? We jumped the shark a little. So I don't know if jumping the shark and quinoa make any sense, but let's hope they do. We're just trying to make it so that there's other parts of kids' lives instead of just how they're doing on their grades.
That's great. That's a great segue to this next question about what can community youth sports and activity organizations do better or different to be more aligned with the changes in culture? Anything small and specific or big in general? Any advice?
Yeah, can I just
Lenore?
jump?
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm just
go
going to
ahead.
jump in really fast. So,
Awesome.
Steel Sports, 30,000 kids across the country in after-school soccer leagues, 3 days a week, and then a game on the weekend. They read Peter Gray. They read about what we're doing, in Wilton and in Pat Med, and they started instituting at the beginning, the first 10 to 20 minutes of every practice now is free play. And they started it as a pilot project, and it was going to go big at a certain time when a certain virus hit. But the reason they were going to expand it to all 30,000 students was that they were noticing that a couple of things were happening. The kids were coming early because they wanted to have fun. The kids were making new friendships, and they were trying new techniques that they would be scared to try in a game, because what if they were losing and it was all, important to the coach and the parents and this, but this was their time. And they realized this was actually better for the teams, not just for the spirit, but actually they were playing better. So I'd say, it's a small step, 10 or 20 minutes at the beginning of a session for free play.
That's great. Michael, I think this one's for you, Michael, but feel free to chime in, anyone. How do we begin to peel off some of the pressure from our high school population, particularly in high achieving districts? Many students suffer from anxiety and depression due to the pressure to achieve at such high levels. What does play and let grow look like for our high schoolers?
That's a great question. And actually, I'll be able to answer that a year from now. So if there's a wormhole I can go through, because actually I'm working with Peter Gray and Lenore to actually do this within my district for next year. So, for us, it's classical conditioning for our psychologists out there. Right now, I've rented one of those big drums that the Energizer Bunny has, and you just keep beating the same drum, the same message over and over again, which is about balance. For me, it's about balance in every system. If they're not in balance, whether it's the human system or any other system that you know about, if it's just a little bit out of whack, it doesn't serve it well. So I'm trying to educate and to work with our HSAs or PTAs, to certainly work with our administrators, as Carolyn Dweck says, to change mindsets. I mean, it really starts in that organic way. And Vicki, as you know, to change systems, it takes a very long time. You don't just snap your fingers. So it's about trust too, by the way. They have to trust this message that it's best for their kids. So there's a lot of conversations, a lot of educating, a lot of, let's say, showing your movie, Vicki, showing this movie, Chasing Childhood, and then to show that the pipeline to the Ivies or the sub-Ivies or anywhere else, to actually understand that they're not just looking for high test scores. They aren't. And there's this urban legend, there's this myth out there. I don't know who's perpetuating it, but it's just not true. And so that message needs to happen more and more. And I do need to leave, unfortunately. This is such a great conversation.
Thanks so much, Michael.
I just want to say thank you to Wilton. Thank you to the Eastons, and certainly Lenore and Vicki, to you and Eden and everybody else. Thank you for this opportunity, and keep plugging away, everybody. This is well worth it. Have a wonderful
Thanks
evening.
so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Wait till he's gone, and then I have to tell you about him. Oh, there he's gone. So there's like a little video of him on YouTube talking about how much he despised school as a kid. He just hated it until he started getting into tennis. And tennis was sort of the only thing that kept him engaged at all. And what we're hoping for is, by opening some other avenues, by, what are you baking? What did you make at home? What did you do for your Let Grow project? Did you teach your sister how to ride a bike? I mean, all these things are important parts of a person. And if they're important to the school, well, then school becomes important to them. So he is such a great example of having found something that he cared about. He realized that other kids could be like him. And that's what he's just trying to do. He's trying to break out this narrow role. And the fact that Port Washington hired him, Port Washington, which is just like where I grew up, which is the North Shore of Chicago, which is just like Wilton, which is just like, I'm sure, certain parts of LA, really achievement oriented. For them, they might be balking, but they chose him. And they chose him because they knew he had this vision of kids that are more than their SAT scores and how many APs they're taking, and they want it and they don't want it. And once they see that the kids can succeed without that horrible pressure that Vicki's film was the first one that introduced me to, it is going to crack the ice. If Wilton and Fort Washington, and then my old school district back in Chicago, New Trier West, if it does this, I think it will light the way. And some of the private schools too, people want to follow the leaders, and you guys are leaders changing.
Absolutely. And I also think in the meantime, there's a lot a parent and a family can do, right? Because you can make a choice to step off the treadmill, as I did with a couple of my kids, and the world doesn't fall apart. But just to go back to this original question and what Michael had to say on balance, I think if we can each and collectively as communities look at the schedules for our kids, most of us could not do these schedules, right? They're in school 35 hours a week. They've got homework between 15 and 25 hours at the high end. For the kids who are taking AP courses, they've got organized sports. They're putting in 70 to 80-hour weeks. We're crowding out time for sleep. We're crowding out time for connection with family. We're crowding out time for them to know themselves. And so I think as a parent, when my oldest daughter got sick in middle school, is when I realized I had to make a change. There's nothing more important than our kids' health. And so I think there's just a lot that we can individually and collectively do. And the more parents that step off the treadmill, who show up at school board meetings, who show up at conversations like this evening, conversations with the task force, I think we will begin to see that tipping point that our kids and our families so sorely need. Yeah, Genevieve, it looked like you had something to say.
I do. I want to add something, and it's come up for me a few times with things Savannah said, Lenore said, Mike said, all of you. And that is that I think too, when we're thinking about what's best for our kids and how to help them be healthy and well, and we're focusing on their mental health and play and all these things, I think it is true that I believe that academic achievement, excellence, all of that rests on a foundation of wellness. And if we're not socially, emotionally well, we're not going to achieve that. I also think that we need to get a little unstuck from the idea that our goal is to send kids to IVs and the like. I think, for one thing, I'm not sure it's true for most people. It's true for some people, and we tend to think it's true for all people, but it's not. And when you talk to parents, a lot of people will say, that's not what I want. I want my kids to be successful. I want them to, a lot of people want their kids to go to college, but they're not necessarily aiming for this short list of schools. And I think if we can give people the opportunity to come together and talk about that, I think people are willing to say it privately, but they may be reluctant to say it publicly. They may be reluctant to say it in a group. And if they come to a big forum, they don't want to be the one who says, is that really the goal? It feels like it's not the right answer, right? When you get the question, what's the most important thing? There's a right answer, and that's not it. So giving people sort of permission to say, actually, that's not my answer to that question, and to know that they're not the only one. They're not weird for thinking that that's not the right answer. I think that's important, and that's hopefully something else that this film and conversations like this allow people to do, is to start to break that down. We have to let go of the idea. Wilton High School graduates approximately 300 kids a year. It's just not possible for them all to go to the top 10 schools on the US News and World Report list. That's not how life is. That's not how college admissions works. And that's not unfair. It's not that it's unfair. And it's also not a problem. It's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to go in lots of different directions and do lots of different things. So we need to, as a community, let go of that. Anyway, that's okay. Now I'm going to get off my soapbox. So what am I inspiring?
Yeah, well said. That's what it says. That's great.
Completely agree with what you shared, Genevieve. And I think as a parent, for me, it was far more important that my kids graduate high school with some life skills. And when you think about the skills that are developed in the context of an academic environment, it's a very narrow range of skills that don't necessarily translate to adulthood. And so many kids today have had crowded out the opportunity for an after-school job, for housework, just, the things that we all grew up doing. And so I think, we say that we want kids who grow up, who have agency, who know how to be creative, who know how to work with other people, but we really crowd out a lot of opportunities for them to actually develop those very skills. So I really appreciate what you had to say. I'm not sure, I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Go ahead, Savannah.
I just had something to say about the college thing. I know that for me, it was a symptom of a larger problem, but the thing that was in the forefront of my mind that was really causing me a lot of pain when I was in high school was the college process. And this idea that I had to get into the best school I could get into, that it had to be the perfect school for me, because I wasn't going to get into an Ivy. So I had to find one that was perfect for me, and was also high on the US News and World Report list. And that was so unbelievably stressful. I landed in the hospital, and not every kid lands in the hospital, but I think in my experience, most of my friends all had very similar experiences where we felt like it was just the most important thing was figuring out what school we were going to go to. And now that I'm 25 years old and I'm a year out of college, and most of my friends are 4 years out of college, and we all went to very different schools. Some of us went to schools that were more name brand. Some of us didn't. We went to very different places. I ended up at culinary school. And it doesn't really matter where you go. You know, some of us transferred from the first school we went to. Like I have college credits from like 5 different schools. And I think college is important. I'm very glad I have my degree. I almost didn't get a bachelor's degree. I almost stopped after an associate's, and now that I have my bachelor's, and I think it was very important that I did that. Although it is not for everyone, but it matters more that I have the degree than what school it came from. So wherever you end up that works for you is good enough. And I think that we don't have to be striving for perfection in everything. Maybe you can make one thing perfect, but you can't make everything perfect all at the same time. You can't. It's impossible. Nobody's perfect. And college is one of those things. It's not going to be perfect. We also, as high schoolers, are told college is going to be the best 4 years of our lives, right? College was not. If college was the best 4 years of my life, like, life's not going to be all that great. Like, it was good, but like, I hope I have better years, you know? And I think I will have better years, you know? And college is not going to be perfect. We're not going to get into the perfect school. I thought my first choice school, I got in, I was going to go there. I lasted a year. It didn't work out for me, right? It was my perfect school, but it didn't work out. So, you know what? It's all about taking off the pressure on college. I think college is a huge one. And obviously that's what your movie is about, Vicki. And it's just it's so big. It feels so big when you're a junior, a sophomore, a freshman in high school. It feels so big, but it's not the most important thing you're ever going to do.
Well, I think that's really well said. We put so much emphasis on those 4 years, and we need to remember it's 4 years in the course of a life. So thank you, Savannah.
And I think that a way to take off pressure on high school kids is to tell them that, and to have them hear it from people like me and other kids who aren't kids anymore, right? But we went through it, and now we can see. If you know somebody who has a kid who's in their 20s now, like, just ask them about it. They're going to be honest with you. They're not wrapped up in that high school cycle anymore. So they're going to be honest and say, actually, it didn't matter that much. So if your kid can have a conversation with someone like that, I think that's a huge step.
It's a great idea. They should have like 21-year-old college counselors.
Absolutely.
Right? Really great. Wow.
Yeah, so I've got another question. I'm not sure where we are in time, but I see we still have a lot of audience members. So I'll make this the last question and then invite everybody who wants to share some wrap-up thoughts. Do the schools put too much homework on kids? It seems it takes my kids hours on end. It's not fun or rewarding. Any hope for change here? Also, the ability for them to see scores in real time on Schoology and PowerSchool adds so much weight to it. Does this feel like an area for evaluation?
Yes.
Absolutely, there's not a doubt in my mind. And lots of schools have addressed homework policies, but we have not gone far enough to this idea that it's all right for young people to put in a second shift at the end of the day. And this is an area where I think parents can really become advocates for change. Did you want to add something, Leonore?
No, I wanted to say that.
I'll add,
Okay, well, I want to
I'll add
just,
something. I'll add something.
go ahead, Jen.
I think that in general,
Uh-huh.
you know, the district does have guidelines for homework, and if you feel like your kids are really struggling under the burden of homework, I would familiarize yourself with the guidelines, and then that's a place actually for your child to advocate for themselves, or for you to help your child advocate for themselves with teachers. If your child is doing hours of homework, it's, you know, it's okay to send a note to the teacher and say, hey, you know, Savannah spent an hour and a half last night on math, and is that what should be going on, or do we need to make some adjustments here? I don't think teachers generally want the homework to be that burdensome, so it's a great place for communication. And then, you know, I actually think that having access 24/7 to grades in real time as they get uploaded is, I've seen it with my own kids, that, you know, my kids would check their PowerSchool obsessively. And so if there's any way to put limits around that in your own family, that's great. If you and a bunch of other parents feel that there should be some limits, this is all technology. I'm confident the district could respond. If parents said, we don't really want 24-hour access to grades, can we find some other solutions? You know, the problem is, again, if parents are asking for 24 access to grades, then they're going to get that. So if parents get together and say, we would like to see grades only refresh 2 or 3 times a week at a set time, maybe preferably after school when children are home, ask for that. Ask for that if that's what people want.
That's a great point.
I didn't have 24-hour access to PowerSchool. That wasn't quite a thing. Maybe it happened like my senior year, but I was really checked out my senior year. That sounds awful. That sounds so bad. Like, let's nip that in the bud right now.
Yeah, and I have seen schools shut that down altogether when the parents organize for that. And I think it's particularly harmful when it's the parents, us, checking that PowerSchool or School Loop. And then we become one more person measuring our kids' performance, which doesn't do wonders for healthy relationships. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Savannah. So I just want to share last thing. Somebody put in the chat that something really cool that Michael did as he followed a student around in each grade for a day and saw how grueling it was. Maybe all of us should do that. So this is actually an idea that we've had for a film for a long time, to find a community where the adults in the community could actually do school for a week. And
That's a great idea.
yeah, there's a reporter, I think it's Carl Greenfeld, who wrote for The Atlantic, who did his 7th grade daughter's homework for a week and said it nearly killed him. There's also a teacher up in Seattle who did the same thing for a week or a month and said it was a mind-numbing experience to go through the school day. And so I think that might be an interesting exercise to get parents, educators, school leaders, school board members to follow a handful of students around for a day, a week, a month. I think we'd learn a lot. So I just want to thank everybody for participating this evening. I want to echo what Eden said earlier. If you know another community to bring this film to and help grow the conversation, I think that would be incredibly beneficial. Whether it's a temple, a church, your workplace. I mean, every workplace has parents. This is a service to parents. Community center, public library, universities. We want to grow this conversation nationally and begin to put the focus on letting our kids be kids, letting them develop some agency from a young age. And so I just invite you to visit the website, chasingchildhood.com. I'll also go ahead and put my email in the chat so that if you have an idea right after tonight and that's easier for you, feel free to give me an email or a phone call, and we'll support you in bringing the film. We make it really easy. All you have to do is find a venue, and in this case, while we're all virtual, it's incredibly easy because you don't even need the venue. You just need to be committed to inviting your community to attend the screening. Thank you to all the panelists. If each of you want to take a few minutes to share some closing thoughts, I'm sure the audience would appreciate that.
My closing thought is we should have Savannah going around to schools, you know? I mean, we keep thinking like, oh, we should have, you know, electoral presentation. I agree with that. Or at least Savannah should talk to the parents, you know, just like as a cautionary tale and then a tale of truth and growth and to give them hope instead of them just being so obsessed. I mean, I have kids who recently have gone to college too. It is a very dicey, horrible time. And, you know, I could have listened to Savannah. That would have been good.
Thank you. I think for my closing thoughts, I've said it already tonight, but it's all about being open and talking about whatever's going on. You know, if you keep it all closed down, either behind closed doors of your house or just in your own head, if you're a kid, like it's never gonna get better. I mean, it could. It's just gonna be really hard. Like I'm in recovery from addiction, and something we say in the recovery community a lot is we get better together. And I think that that's just a really important message for getting better from anything, getting better from a physical illness, a mental illness, addiction, anything. We get better together because with the support of other people, with your people behind you, it's just so much easier. It's still going to be hard, don't get me wrong, but it's so much easier than trying to do it all by yourself. So, and I think that's applicable to the wider goal and the smaller stuff. We get better together. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Well, I can't believe I have to
Lenore?
follow Savannah. That's like she's a tough act to follow. I do want to say to everyone watching, whether you're in Wilton or not, I hope you leave feeling optimistic. I hope you leave feeling positive that change is possible. And it's, you know, I've seen change in Wilton in the last few years. I really have. And as Vicki said, you know, change doesn't happen fast. It doesn't happen overnight. I've had my moments of frustration where I've like, why are we still working on this? Like, I thought we'd be done 2 years ago, but that's just not realistic. And I'm proud of the progress that Wilton's made. And if you're not in Wilton, your community can do it too. If you are in Wilton, do know that it is hard, and raising children is hard. And there's always going to be bumps, but we're making progress and we're getting better. And our schools are just filled with wonderful, caring adults who want what's best for your children. And they cannot do it themselves. We can't always say, the schools should do this, the schools should do that. We all have to do it. We have to be committed to what we think is best and what we think is going to be helpful so that our schools can get behind that. And then the last thing I want to say is, you know, it takes a group of people working hard. And I happen to know of a group of people you can join. You can join the Free Play Task Force, or you can get involved with Wilton Youth Council and one of our other programs. I'm an employee now, but I'm part-time, and we are so reliant on our volunteers. We can't do a thing without our volunteers. And we have the most amazing group of people, and so dedicated, so committed. And if you get involved with us, you'll love it. It's a great group of people. So come join us.
Thank you. Lenore, do you have anything you want to say to wrap up?
No. I thought
Okay.
all of that was fantastic. I salute Wilton. I salute you, Vicki. I mean, everybody here is cool. I know everybody wants to go and there's homework to be done. So I think we'll say goodnight. And I'm so grateful that this movie was made, because a lot of the ideas were in my head and they would have never been so beautifully shaped or shown without that film and without Wilton. So hooray.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you.
Thank you for moderating. You were wonderful.
Oh yeah,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
so much. It was my
you.
honor to participate. Thanks so much. I'm glad this conversation is ongoing.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.